And good evening, everybody who's joining us here tonight for this wonderful Nine Arches Press triple book launch with Katie Hale, Sarala Estruch and L.Kiew launching their wonderful new books, which we have here tonight to enjoy launching with you all, this wonderful selection of new titles. Absolutely thrilled to be launching these three wonderful books. It's a real delight to be doing this. So just as everybody joins us on YouTube, hello, thank you for joining us tonight. It's really wonderful to see so many of you here and so many lovely messages from all over the country, from Kendal, from Brighton, from Yorkshire Dales, from Ealing, from Hebden Bridge. Thank you so much for joining us. So a little reminder about the books which we'll be celebrating tonight. We have Sarala Estruch's beautiful After All We Have Travelled. We have the striking More Than Weeds by L.Kiew and Katie Hale's enchanting and powerful White Ghosts. So really delighted people to enjoy this wonderful reading tonight. What we will do shortly is we're going to have readings from each of the poets, beginning with Sarala Estruch, then L.Kiew, and then Katie Hale. To tell you a little bit about each book as well, so I will introduce each author and tell you a little bit more about each of them. But first of all, say we're really delighted that so many of you have joined us for our first online event of the year. Nine Arches Press have been doing these online events since 2020, and we're really keen to continue delivering them. And it's just a real delight to have so many people joining us for these live events. Please do use the chat. We really encourage you to do that on YouTube, and it's a really lovely way of getting in touch with our audience and knowing that you're there and sharing the poems and sharing the reactions with you. So that's really appreciated. And please feel free to join in throughout the evening and post in the chats. It's as I say, and let us know where you are. So without further ado, I'm Jane Kamain, and I'll be your host for this evening's reading to tell you a little bit as well about our readers, our poets, and the books that they will be reading from. Our first reader tonight will be Sarala Estruch. Her incredible debut, After All We Have Travelled, is a distinctive journey across time, continents and cultures, through memory and generations of history, exploring long legacies of empire and those personal and political effects of that. It is a story also of intergenerational trauma, of grief and disconnection, but it's also the story of the enduring power of love, connection, and of embarking into motherhood. To tell you a little bit as well about my own personal connection to this book, having worked with Sarala since the days of Primers, when she was one of our three Primers poets, it's a really compelling series of poems. And just to kind of draw your attention to the cover a little, this incredible work of art by Zarina. Do look up her artwork online, which we were so delighted to get permission to have on Sarala's cover. I feel like it's a really interesting connection as well to the poems within, that map-like image. It illustrates the imaginative territory in a way of the book itself, and finding the way that the poems find their route through often deeply personal territory. These poems not only uncover the family stories, but wider histories, those of colonialism, of borders, of culture, of languages, of crossings, of partitions, of marriages. So it's a really rich, powerful collection, which I think invites us to explore those stories. And within that, as Rishi Dastidar says, if you've ever felt unmoored or adrift from your family or even yourself, these poems here will help to ground you. In their lens, they see you, all of us. Without further ado, please welcome our first reader this evening, Sarala Estruch.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I'm just absolutely delighted to be here tonight to celebrate the triple launch of After All We Have Travelled, More Than Weeds and White Ghosts. I'm really, really looking forward to Lisa and Katie's readings after mine. So I also really want to thank you, Jane, and the Nine Arches Press team for all the tremendous work you've done in the background. And, you know, your support has been absolutely vital for turning, you know, After All We Have Travelled into an actual published book. So I'm absolutely delighted and so grateful to Jane and the Nine Arches team. So I'm going to read for around 15 minutes or a bit less, and I'm going to begin with the opening poem of the collection. It's called On Sound. On Sound. They say no sound is ever lost, that every wail, peal of laughter, bullet burst, every curse, prayer, oath, every water skim, pebble roll, snail shell crush, reverberates indefinitely at a frequency our ears cannot touch, but the body hears. So one of the central themes of the book is migration. My mother and father immigrated to England in the 70s from France and India, respectively. And this next poem reimagines the moment my parents met in London and is written in the voice of my mother, or the speaker's mother. I was inspired to write the poem, if inspired is the right word. In fact, I would say I was compelled. I think I felt compelled to write the poem to counter the xenophobic rhetoric which was spewed by politicians and the media during the EU referendum. And in light of the horrifying, dehumanizing discourse surrounding the illegal migration bill more recently, I thought I would read this poem this evening. It's called A Love Story, or The English Dream. London, 1976. Do you remember, love, that day at the student hostel on Cross Street? The way the light tilted in at the window to settle on two emigrants as we waited for our keys. Except now we'd arrived, we were emigrants no longer, but immigrants carrying a larger suitcase of connotations. Me, pale-skinned, in new flares, European features and freshly bobbed hair. You, brown-skinned, in polished Oxfords, blazer and sleek side parting. That day, the sunlight illuminated us equally, in love as we were, with a country gleaned from school textbooks and photographs your mother kept in the album of her childhood. Gardens with rose bushes and hedgerows, cherry-cheeked men and women chirping good morning from behind the garden gate. Neighbourly. It was not neighbourly, the way they looked when you stepped on a bus, or the names you were christened at the restaurant where you worked, in the kitchen, suds up to biceps, hands deep in the crud of this country, washing and washing, fingers still aching the following morning as you took notes in law school. While in the country of your birth, you'd dined with nabobs, already received a bachelor's degree. These days, as we walk arm in arm down London streets, turning our eyes and ears inside out to deflect stares and curses, I recall the school textbooks, manicured lawns, fences and gates, cherry-cheeked persons with wide open faces, and think, yes, the English are neighbourly, as long as you stay on your side of their gate. As anyone who has read my earlier work will know, I explore my family history in my work, including the fact that my parents were forbidden to marry by my father's family. And this next poem is a contrapuntal poem in which two voices are woven, the speaker's voice and the speaker's mother's voice. I say the speaker here because although these poems draw on personal experience, as I've explained, they also incorporate elements of craft and of fiction, as I think every work, creative work, does. I like contrapuntal poems because they make visible the fact that multiple meanings, truths, and realities are possible at any given moment. Starting from a Dream, 1983. Waking at night, my mother-to-be approaches the window, hesitates in this foreign bed before the curtain, heart like a river, with the wind running outside. She finds lashings of rain, the sky clouded over, as if it is being chased, and strangely bright. The trees tremble, and you in another bed. She thinks of my father, a familiar stranger, in another room, since she arrived in this country, and the faraway look on the other side his family wear whenever she enters a room of this ancestral kingdom, as though they are already watching her leave. I am a spring. The storm enters her. The brisk wind pushes her under a skin of soil, against the glass of herself, and a part of her shatters, a touch away from breaking, while another rises, slips out into the urgent night, through. While my father maintained a regular presence in my childhood, I grew up estranged from my paternal relatives until my father passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack at the age of 37, when I was only 7. My paternal relatives then welcomed me into their lives, which the book explores. This next poem takes place almost 30 years after my father's death, on a visit to Uttar Pradesh, which is where my paternal family settled after partition. Dear Father, tonight we arrived at the family home. It was dark. We stepped through the meshed screen into the tiled entrance to find the stuffed swamp deer, antlered and black-eyed, relic from your hunting days. Grandad in the living room, switching off the television. I introduced him to my husband and children, your grandchildren. I wish you could have seen how his smile embraced us, how he looked strong as 9 years ago, only his hair was milk white. Strange as it is to write, there is something of you here now. Gran too. These rooms pulse with you, motes of thought and feeling still in motion. The way a person lingers in the fabric of carpets, the plaster of walls, long after they have left. It feels so good to have arrived home, by which I mean I have belonged here once. Perhaps I can belong here again. And the final poem I'm going to read is called Baisakhi, Baisakhi, So for those of you who don't know, Baisakhi is a significant spring festival celebrated throughout India and the world. And the poem could also be considered a contrapuntal poem, as it consists of 2 columns placed side by side. The first column describes my own family's celebration of Baisakhi in 2019, while the second column reimagines the horrific events of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, which took place in Amritsar 100 years earlier. I placed these moments side by side as a form of interrogation to consider how the past continues to reverberate in the present. Baisakhi, Baisakhi. 14th of April, 2019. On the morning of Baisakhi, we rise and after breakfast, dress our heads in cotton cloth, climb the white stone staircase to grandfather's prayer room. On the roof, we remove our shoes and step into the glass-panelled room, bowing before the sacred book, as Uncle has shown us. Grandfather is already there, sat behind the Guru Granth Sahib. Draped in gold gossamer, he pulls away. The children watch in silence. The children wait. Grandfather opens the book at random, begins to read, and we listen, understanding not with our ears, but with our hearts, the Lord's Prayer on this auspicious day. When he is finished, he reads another prayer just for us, which he translates line by line, thanking God for our safe arrival, blessing our golden lives. 13th of April, 1919. On the morning of Baisakhi, we rise and after breakfast, dress in our finest, travel to Jallianwala Bagh and gather with family and friends. In full sunlight, we sit on packed earth, spread the cloth, lay out food. We thank God for the meal, bring rice and dal to our mouths. The soldiers are already there, standing on the mount, guns raised. Bullets burst, bodies tumble to the earth. The children watch in silence. The children wait. Then they run. We all run. There is nowhere to go. Bullets pummeling the single exit, which is also the single entrance. Some of us jump into the well. We who survive utter prayers for those we lost. The time has passed for screaming. The time is ripe for grieving, for apology, atonement, healing. Thank you very much.
A huge thank you, Sarala, for that extraordinary reading. Apology, atonement, healing, 3 words that end that poem that just kind of resonate beautifully at the end of it. Sarala's poetry is political, sharply aware. These are poems which are populated by loss and mourning, but also full of meaning, belonging, identity, arrival. A whole beautiful array of writing, which I think also the formal way in which Sarala's poems interweave and their multiplicities. It's really worth seeing them in the book, in this wonderful collection. Congratulations, Sarala, on After All We Have Travelled. We're so delighted to be publishing it. Thank you, Sarala. And our next reader this evening is L.Kiew. L.Kiew's book which we have just published in February. More Than Weeds is out now and is also a debut collection, because tonight is the celebration of 3 wonderful debut collections. So we're really delighted to be raising a glass to cheer these wonderful new books as they arrive in the world. Like Sarala, it's been really wonderful to spend time over the last year really with L.Kiew's extraordinary poems, and I think that they have such a tenacious and beautiful and detailed attention within these poems. L.Kiew's writing just has this incredible detail that really urges us to see the world in parallel, to see the natural world and the human world, and to make connections almost root-like between them with language and form, and those moments within the poems themselves which create that realization. Like Sarala and Katie's poems, these are also poems which are deeply aware of the political and social constructs around them and the contexts from where their poems spring. L.Kiew's work also just has this incredible ability to make you feel the life in everything, the liveliness of everything, the things that are blooming and living around us, the plants, and to give voice to those as well as drawing these incredible parallels. To tell you a little bit more about the collection and to give you a little taste for the writing, Sean Hewitt says, L.Kiew's poems are inventive and iridescent. More Than Weeds navigates ecology, migration and identity with subtle and complex skill. Animated, strange, acutely observed, the world in these poems is given an arresting voice. And More Than Weeds is a book that really explores how the language of migration and how that is used in relation to plant and animal species as well as peoples. These are knowledgeable and verdant poems, drawing deeply on botanical and ecological detail, revealing secret histories, thriving in the gaps between definitions, like precious seedlings, unforced flowers, tongues of leaves. Will you please welcome L.Kiew?
Thank you so much, Jane. It's amazing to be here, and amazing to be one of the 9 Arches poets and to be launching tonight with Sarala and Katie. I'm going to open a bit like Sarala did with the first poem in my collection, because it's an invitation to really step out, step out of your living rooms and step out into the natural world. Scythianism. A woman walks into a city. There's a forest of tall lights, concrete, high-rise, cast shadows, flex the horizon. A woman walks into a city. There's a field of tarmac, cars careen, wind-blown lights. Street and lamp are intimate. We could talk of crowds, not of lawn, of congestion, or of overgrown grass. A woman walks into a city. There's an allotment of people uprooted, torn weeds, split seeds, roadside tatters. Far from windows, a woman walks into a city. There's one tree, shattered, blossom, nubs of new. She falls to her knees. Witness how they bear the weight. Every branch is a script, a bone grip on the earth. Leaves spell the distances, slivers of hearts. As Jane said, my poems explore the language of migration through plants, and quite a number of the poems give voice to plants, and they are often plants that were once much beloved, but now we don't love them so much. So I'm going to read 3 poems in those voices tonight. This one's in the voice of a plant that's a common perennial, and it's very widely introduced into gardens, and it often escapes. Corydalis Lutea. She tries to breathe. Balance blooms like crested larks. She's fled across walls to be free as bluebells or narcissus. Fumitory disguises her yellow. By midsummer, she's fern-like. Her leaves are bleeding hearts, ground cover for shade. On poor soil, she and her sisters set roots and risings. To remain cheerful, she believes, persistence rewards a place. When she has a wasp in her mouth, she asks, can a weed be just another name the rain calls down for refugee, unforced flower? The next plant has been on the invasive alien species of Union concern list since 2017. Impatiens glandulifera. We've spread since we first set in 1839, introduced as ornamental jewelweed. There have been a great many enthusiasts. Miss Welch, who in 1948 collected ripe pods from Sheffield and transported us to the Isle of Wight. Mrs. Norris of Camberley gave us dripping pink to passers-by, our sticky seeds sedimenting shoes. Thick thickets of us clog streams. We mass the banks of rivers, press damp together and splay in woods. Now when they see us lining green along roadsides, they let the council know. We disperse aggressively, they say, seed heads exploding afternoon showers puddle grass. Unabashed, we keep growing, mourning our mown sisters, not allowed forgiveness. We proliferate too seductively for effective control, and anyway, the bees prefer us to natives. Between our roots, we hold taut and trusting, as we first were, innocent seedlings from the soil. The title of my next poem makes reference to a 19th century figure. He was a Scottish plant hunter, or I prefer the term biopirate. And many people know him because he introduced something like 250 new ornamental plants, mainly from China and Japan, to Western gardens. He also had a pivotal role in the development of the tea trade in India. So think East India Company, think the triangular trade with opium, think about the social disruption that came with those trades. And also think about the plants. Testimony against Robert Fortune and his ilk. Zealous collectors of scant morality, you assert your right to everything. Xylem bleeds, and it was you who confined us in Wardian cases. Vain is your acquisition, and in vain you exclude those unprofitable. Our sister weeds see to that. Tame, smooth, and subdue as you like. Shades of trees yield nothing. We're not bounded. Roots forced in quest to quicken the mercantile economy, wriggle free. Plant, trapper, seed, thief. You see empty ground ripe for resettlement, and you not only claim but frame soil in cold measures of demise, domain, dominion. Lawn as a penitentiary, and your false knowledge imposed just to make you gleam rich. It is so much chaff. Hearts here are ground swelled, flowers, flowers, flowers from bulbs and shoots, emerging shy saplings heal, disturbance of earth, spade broken. Calm is the foliage beyond threat of hand, axe, mower, and we grow. Open gardens. My people pass abandoned wastelands, stop to dig and stake, sift soil into clean beds. My people use earth-spattered tools a day at a time, plants wild around ruins. And my people overlook catmint and cardoons, the rough corners, riotous with nettles and snails. My people tolerate fat hen and pig thistle, hams propagate, tongues enjoy. My people thrive, deadhead and pot, green into ordered clumps. My people begin to root out, abrasive colours, among the casualties, bearded iris and phlox. My people unfold dark, dirt dreams of tendriling, wind drifts of pollen, cultivars bearing bright heads. When my people rise, how easy it becomes to fence what grows, to put closed signs on the gates. Another plant poem. Kowinski's Fleabane. Thank you for collecting me. I know now I was uncultivated and I wasn't any good against fleas. You forgave me, called me dependable daisy, let me soften edges, carpet stony ground. Thank you for giving me a bed in the rockery, the slivers of space. You appreciated how I bloomed, white arrayed for most of the summer. It seems I've outgrown your welcome, no longer fitting the floral scheme, spilling from understory and onto driveway, wrinkling roots into the tiny gaps I discover. I've heard you talking about me. Prolific self-seeder, easy to kill and difficult to keep out. You gouge clumps, scorch earth, and spray glyphosate. I know you're busy. Thank you for not committing enough effort to root me out. My petals uncurl. I'm settled, and my seedlings sprawl out. I love seaside, small cracks. I hate hard winters. Pioneer of disturbed sights, I remain grateful for the wind, the part sun. The next poem I'm going to read quotes text from a government policy paper. It's the National Security and Borders Bill, Deprivation of Citizenship Fact Sheet, which was published in December 2021. Only in the interests of national security. The Home Secretary decides each case personally. Moon turns away, cucumbers are shivering. Who likes the trellis and the stake? The gardener prunes and harrows, leaves bone whitened, first fellings, thin trailings. Though we will always try to tell an individual that their citizenship is to be deprived. How fast fronds fall to soil. It might not be possible in exceptional circumstances. The fog leans in, dripping insinuations. Even though we've been here before and for a long time, we're only hedge clippings. Because we cannot immediately tell a person that they are to be deprived of British citizenship, fog is one wet slap after another, to the fallen leaves returned. It does not make the decision any less valid or prevent the deprivation order being made. Dandelion in dirt, plastic zip ties, twine. Process and safeguards are already in place. On winds moan, a slam shut, sound may be left human. We would explain their appeal rights when they make contact with us. How the ground lies, lilies pretend to know nothing of it. The gardener grows more shadows, grows more silence. How are we to bear branches left for crows? And I'm going to finish with this poem, which is all about weeds. It's called Weeds Are Wild. Not of the garden cast, out in the wrong places along the verge, the air palpably dense. Weeds are at boundaries of houses, at the bottom of lawns. Weeds wish for completeness of night. Weeds lie in tree pits, fill your dreams with yellow glow. Weeds are petal and leaf, push up in patterns, and here's a shape that could be a body. Weeds are disappearing to get changed. Weeds attract butterflies. Bees listen to weeds. Weeds are trusting, follow you like a lover's caress along instep, hem, calf, the thigh. Weeds have long stems, from root to tip, brown-skinned, hairy buds, are what to yank and what to leave and what you should never touch. Weeds are itching to be perfect. Weeds are asking for it. Weeds interfere and are common, cannot be confined. Weeds' answer is in the blooming. Blessings bruise under cheekbones, vile. Weeds are a 4-year wait for justice. Weeds are abandoned, sprout tongues randomly. While there's room for languages to grow, there's no need to pull weeds. To get rid of weeds, check first how they testify. Stalked yellow, apart, ripped away, too coarse to spread, missing fingernails, a circle of swallowed quiet. Weeds you thought you'd pulled quietly continue creeping. Weeds claim more. Weeds still won't be enough. Weeds are. Thank you.
Huge thank you, L.Kiew, for that extraordinary reading and for that invitation to step out from behind our screens into the intimate and alive spaces, the fringes, the edges, where much is blooming. These attentive poems which also attend to our grip on the earth, that business of our existence, but also importantly, poems that resist the hostile environments that governments have built in the UK. And particularly that incredible line, can the weed be another name? Be just another name, sorry, for refugee unforced flower. Thank you so much also for the wonderful comments from our YouTube audience. Power to the weeds, says Sarah Corbett. So it's lovely to read your comments as we're hearing the poems. Beyond hand, axe, mower, we grow, says L.Kiew's poem. And on we go to our next reading, and our final reading this evening from Katie Hale, our third debut poet who's reading this evening. It's really interesting as well, hearing all of these poems and thinking about these books, and also thinking about the ways in which three very distinctive voices, but the ways in which poems in their collections both look into history, but also don't look away and are drawing threads and connections between different things. I was really moved by Katie Hale's manuscript when I read it, and it seemed such a bold, complete and important book, a necessary one which resists those kind of easy narratives about the past and really interrogates and asks all the vital questions, both of family stories that research had unearthed, but also of whiteness, complicity, inheritance, and skillfully studied each of these in poems which, again, similar to L.Kiew and Sarala Estruch's books, really explores through the form of the poems themselves, through the language, through the ways that poems work on the page. And I'm not just saying this to you as the publisher who wants to sell you these three fantastic poetry books, but the way that all of these poems both sound and work on the page and do different things with the space on the page is really fascinating. And between the white spaces on the page, something really fascinating happens with Katie Hale's poems, the way that they skillfully study that space and unravel some unflinching, bone bare truths in the collection. White Ghosts, this debut book, is a collection which traces those maternal lines and legacies of slavery and whiteness, interwoven into the fabric of America, and through revealing poems travels deep into an intimate history that spans both sides of the Atlantic. Hale unravels the language that haunts those narratives we choose to tell in official versions, through museum labels, civic statues, and into hand-me-down stories. Malika Booker says of this collection, by tracing the histories of women in her family, she offers a radical exploration of whiteness and its impact across the centuries that let the body learn to witness its own skeletons. Will you please welcome our final reader for this evening, Katie Hale.
Thank you so much, Jane, for that amazing introduction, and also for giving a home to White Ghosts. It's amazing to be part of the Nine Arches family, and I just want to echo what Sarala and Lisa have both said about it's, you know, it's a wonderful press to be part of, and it's also amazing to be reading with both of you as well tonight. I think it is really fascinating listening to the way that the poems all speak to each other across the three books, which isn't just a plug to say that people should buy all three, but obviously people should buy all three. So thank you very much. I'm also going to start with the first poem in the collection. It's a poem that marks a turning point in my writing of the book and in my research. I was researching the women in my family, going back through the generations in the US. And I came to the 1810 census, which is the first or last, depending which way you're going, census that only lists the names of the head of the household, and everyone else is just a kind of tally mark. So this was my take on that, and it's called Census 1810. In those days, only white men were born with names, tallied. Free white persons, females, tallied, number of slaves. Each stroke wide enough to hide a life, each a rifle barrel aiming at a voice, each a match lit to exhaustion, a cavity, rough rot in the tooth, filling the mouth with bad taste, with the tongue of omission. While I introduce the next poem, my partner's just going to go walk surreptitiously behind me because the door has just blown open in the storms that we've got going on in Cumbria. So pretend that's not happening. It's all very slick and seamless here. So the next poem I'm going to read is a kind of imagined poem as a conversation. So I wanted to conjure some of these women that I've been researching, my many greats grandmothers going back, and the next poem does that. It imagines her, who she is, and kind of, I suppose, explores some of the sociological research I was doing along with that. So it's called Talking with My Great-Great-Great-Great-Great-Grandmother at a Fast Food Diner off the interstate in Virginia. She orders fries, a supersized Mountain Dew, delighted, belches at the bubbles, orders waffles. She squirts on mustard, then mayonnaise, then ranch. She sees me looking, shrugs. You miss the flavors, being dead. Her chin is slick with meat grease from a quarter pounder. In the strip light above the window, she gleams, more ghost than body. I can see my own reflection through her. My grandfather, he held land in France and the title Marquis, and later as a Huguenot, he lost it. Sure, we knew our rank, our value, our class, but we understood home by what was torn away from us. Girl, don't think we had it easy. As a child, I learned the ritual cinching of waists, washing my face before dawn, learning to keep my pale skin from the sun. I taught my daughters how to dance a minuet in the French style, the rise and fall, how to follow a man's direction, to move without substance or weight. Outside is just the road, a string of lights, a passing on. Back then, we called them fancy dances, and this was how they set themselves apart from other girls who only knew the jigs and common reels, the farming girls, the beggar girls, the slaves. Reaching for biscuits, she mops her gravy, cuts swathes across the plate. The slaves were in my husband's name, not mine. The whole place reeks of fat, regret, and day-old coffee. You know, my husband fought the revolution. Monmouth, Germantown, Brandywine Creek. At each, your British forces spat towards him, bloody teeth with gunshot bites, and the living backed up in the ravine to die like fish, half in, half out of the river, and all for the ideal of America. People like us, we built this country from nothing, from the dust. A victory of half-drunk soda, empty dishes. Neon tubing flickers like lightning. She gathers leftovers closer in like clouds. My brother also was a soldier and a personal friend of Lafayette. You know, when the French general returned years later, it was my brother's daughter scattered flowers in his path. And Lafayette, the gentleman he was, refused to walk on them. Wouldn't crush the petals, he said, that had been laid with such devotion. Can you imagine? For a man of battle, such kindness, such concern for the labor of others. While I was researching the book, I was lucky enough to receive a Developing Your Creative Practice grant from the Arts Council, which enabled me to travel to the US to follow, quite literally in the footsteps of some of these women, to follow the sort of generational migratory journey from Virginia through West Virginia and into Kentucky. And some of the poems in the collection explore the landscape that I was traveling through from a sort of historical perspective, and some deal with encounters that I had on that trip itself. And I found it fascinating how those two spoke to each other, the contemporary experiences I was having and the research that I was doing as well. So I should kind of give a content warning for the next poem for gun violence, which I think will be probably self-explanatory from the title. So this is: in a guest house in Charlottesville, Virginia, a telecommunications engineer shows me his semi-automatic handgun. In the coffee-sour kitchen, counter a clean slate he tilts against, he tells me again about America's only ever mass shooting. His wife is a shut trap at the window, and only when a groundhog ripples the long grass under the trampoline does she say, "Cute." And he says how the dog once lost a groundhog to the earth, so he tipped in a full can of gasoline and a match. And his brother witnessed at the only other exit, loaded with adrenaline and shot and hit, not one, but a family, a whole fucking family. And they're here now, running, flanks quick with terror, each body a sweater flung back, slapped soft as a prayer on the grass, and still they keep coming. Tens of them, hundreds, a class, a bar, a whole shopping mall, a nation. Their heads are silken, smoothed by a trembling of mothers. Their palisade is an undergrowth of wrought fingers, sanctum of hands, each not quite touching the others. I'm going to jump forward a little bit now in time, down the generations, from my 6 times great grandmother to my own grandmother, who was from, she lived most of her life in Somerset, and married my grandfather, who was a GI from the US during the Second World War, and then later followed him out there with my auntie, who had been born by then. So this is Home, and is a poem, I suppose, exploring that journey, that migration over to the US. Home. You send your parents back before the ship casts off. They will make it, but later snow will ball about the house you used to share, frost spit obscenities through the gaps, and you will worry they might run out of fuel. And later, when the man at the immigration desk speaks, it is almost the voice of your husband, but isn't. And when he asks your family name, he no longer means the one you were born to. And later, when you give up your seat to the man on the bus, he will tell you, this is not allowed in this country, not for a white woman, not for a black man. And later your friend, your kindest wife of a German friend, will be barred by your husband from the house. And later a neighbour will leave you sacks of potatoes on the stoop, will say she ordered the extra by mistake. Come home, says the wind, begging you back to the Atlantic. Home, says the squirming daughter at your breast. But the manifest of alien passengers is the size of a Bible, and the name on the page says, you are already home. Come in. Now keep walking. And the next poem, I suppose, follows directly on from that. The ship that my grandma travelled to the US on was called the MS John Erickson. And the family lore about the ship was, the story she'd always told me was that it burned essentially to nothing in New York Harbour. It caught fire and burned, and there was no trace sort of left of it. There was a fire, but the wonders of the internet is that you can research these things in great detail. And I discovered what actually happened to the MS John Erickson. So this is my poem in response to that. On telling my grandmother how the MS John Erickson was scrapped in Bilbao, Spain in 1965. But the ship, you tell me, burned in New York Harbour. The ship was a metal womb. No, the ship was a woman. lumbering through squalls, rough as guts and harder than bone, her belly filled with children. She birthed you and your daughter onto a baleful shore, and years later burned in the harbour. The ship, you insist, gave in to engine failure, or a cigarette tip, or any other searing hurt that sets a life ablaze, unlocked her rivets and let her joints reach wide, unfolding herself on the quayside like a paper boat. The deck hands were thumb smears, and she swallowed them whole. The ship could not be saved, not by all the waters of the Atlantic. She burned white hot and credible as your American dream. She blazed for days, and all the women of my family tossed their own truths on to fuel or quench her. Nobody could say. Menfolk told how she screamed with burning, a sound metallic and loud as her own body, but the women said, no, this is what rapture sounds like. The ship was magnificent in her ending. Her procreating pillar of smoke could be seen across 3 states and 7 intervening decades. You tell it like this. The ship disassembled herself into the sea. The crowds dispersed, and water lapped at the monochrome docks. And that was the end of that. I say, if only we could go back, raise her from the waves, still grandiose with flame. If only we were close enough to burn. And I want to finish with another poem about my own life, my own childhood, which I think, or I hope, speaks to the other poems in the collection, with this idea of what's true and what's passed down and what stories we carry and the kind of objective and subjective truth of those stories. But before I read that, I just want to say another huge thank you to Jane and to Angela, to Lisa and to Sarala, to everyone at Nine Arches, and to everyone for coming along tonight. Thank you very much. So this is Fox in Snow. I was 12. The winter, her bold red body slunk out of the trees to cross the unbroached white. In the centre of the lawn, she stopped, sniffed, raised a questioning paw, then printed her steady line across the waiting snow. The camera was in the desk drawer where it always was, new film locked in plastic canisters like bullets, so we made no record of the fox. Years later, when I ask my mum, she can't remember, isn't sure. It's taken half my life and more to beg this fox onto the page. No ticking clock, no sudden, sharp, hot stink. Even now, she shifts letters, noses her own path through the text. Was it winter? Had it snowed? Did the fox burn red? Her coat a spill of fire, a passing shiver. No spore left lingering on leaves, no drag, no echoing bark. So little left to prove her one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie, for a really compelling, unforgettable reading with poems that delve into records and memory and spectres. That incredible line, the tongue of omission. We feel like we're there under the strip lights with the ghosts that haunt not only family histories, but also those histories of nations. Connect all of the poems in your collection. And what an incredible reading tonight. These are, as I say, poems that really travel, poems that move across borders, poems that go down family lines or move on the breeze like windblown seeds. What an incredible set of readings. Just to say a huge congratulations to our readers tonight, to Sarala Estruch and her All We Have Travelled, to L.Kiew and More Than Weeds, also a debut collection. And our third debut collection of this evening, which is White Ghosts by Katie Hale. All of these books are available from Nine Arches Press. You can buy them as a book bundle. And if you particularly love Nine Arches Press books and poets, please do consider signing up to our book club, which is also available in our shop as well, which means that you get sent all of our books with really beautiful little book plates as well, signed book plates inside of them from each of our poets. Congratulations to Katie Hale, to Sarala Estruch, to L.Kiew on their brand new poetry collections. To close this evening, I'm going to welcome them all onto the screen together, and we're going to say goodnight to our wonderful audience. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. It's been brilliant to have you part of our event. We've been reading your comments. It's been lovely to see the feedback that you've had from tonight's performances. Thank you so much for being there, for joining us again around the kind of digital campfire for poetry that is the online Zoom readings. We're really delighted to have you with us there on YouTube and to feel your presence. So thank you for being part of it. And finally, my thank yous to Katie Hale, to L.Kiew, to Sarala Estruch for their extraordinary readings, and to my colleague Angela Hicken, who's been looking after you all in the YouTube chat as well. We're going to do a little Zoom wave, and then we're going to say goodnight. Thank you, everybody.